Hi everybody, this is Anne. We've received numerous requests to shoot a video describing the process I used to construct my geometric pattern mugs. We challenged ourselves to try and create the perfect hand-built mug. While an impossible task when working with clay, I'm pretty happy with the results, and I'll share these tips with you in this video. As I don't have a slab roller, I rolled the clay out on a pastry mat. I used a rolling pin, and as the clay was stiff and thick, I let gravity stretch it out a bit. As the clay got thinner, I used 2 rulers a 1/4 inch thick on either side of the slab to get a consistent thickness. As the slab got wider, I switched from a 12-inch long rolling pin to this round wooden leg of a table that I found at the hardware store. I flattened out the slab until it was the width of the rulers, a 1/4 inch. Once the slab was thin enough, I used a red rubber rib to smooth it out. This helps compress the clay and helps to avoid warping. I worked east to west, then north to south. Then I needed to rib the other side. I didn't want to stretch out the slab, so to flip it, I put another pastry mat over the slab to sandwich it. Then I flipped it over and peeled it off the first mat. Now I ribbed it like I did with the other side. I have several forms to choose from, but today I chose this width of carpet tubing. It's the perfect size diameter when the clay shrinks. Next, I made a mug template from one of these cutting mats. These mats are very flexible, waterproof, and hardy enough to reuse. I wanted the template to be long enough to wrap completely around the tubing and tall enough to shrink to 5 inches after firing. I used this shrink ruler to measure the correct height onto the template. I know that my clay shrinks around 14%, so I used that side of the ruler to measure with. I marked the template at the 5-inch mark on the long side of the cutting mat. I lined up a straight edge along those marks, then cut with a utility blade. I then placed the template towards the top of the clay slab so that I could get a straight edge on the clay to line up my geometric stamps against. I also used a triangle square to help keep the pattern as straight as I could down to the bottom. If you'd like to see more about these homemade stamps, check out our video, 10 Amazing Ideas Using a Ribbed Mat. After I completed the stamping, then I lined up the template over the clay so that I have a non-stamped rim at the top, comfortable for the lips. Once I got it all lined up, I used a needle tool to score around the template. I then took the template off, lined up a ruler along each score line, and proceeded to cut it out. I turned the mat each time so that I always cut the clay from north to south, trying to keep the needle tool at 90 degrees as I cut. Next, I wrapped the form with plastic wrap. I wet one end of the wrap so that when I rotate the tube, the plastic met along the wet end and stuck to itself. I carefully peeled the clay off of the pastry mat to avoid stretching or damaging the pattern. I gently wrapped the slab around the tube so that the clay overlapped. I marked the clay right where the ends touched. I then unwrapped the clay and laid it down, trying not to stretch the clay. I sandwiched the clay and flipped it over so that I could cut the excess clay off without damaging the stamped pattern. To cut the excess clay, I used a straight edge and a needle tool to cut a straight line along that mark that I made. To marry the ends of the slab for a tight seam, the mirror images of the slab need to be beveled at the same angle. So I used this tool to cut the first end. I held it flat against the table and right along the end of the clay to create a 45-degree angle. I held my finger at the end of the clay so the tool wouldn't stretch when I got to the end. Again, I sandwiched the clay and flipped it over. This end is the mirrored edge and will fit up against the first beveled edge. I cut it just like I did the first one. I then wrapped the clay around the form, making sure the bottom edge was against the table and the sides were right up against the sides of the tubing all the way around. I made sure to form the clay with my hands all the way around the tube, thus creating a memory for the clay so it wouldn't try and straighten back out as it dried. I'm really pleased with how the seam came together. Don't worry if the pattern's not perfect at this point. I then used a scoring tool against both beveled edges of the clay and slipped one of the sides. I gently connected the sides together with the least amount of damage to the stamped pattern. To get a really good connection, I used a flat edge of a triangle ruler and pressed it up against the seam edge. Next, I took the extra clay and rolled it out for a bottom of the mug, just like I rolled out the long first slab. For this next part, you can use a banding wheel, but I find it faster just to use the electric wheel. I placed the slab that I rolled out onto the center of the bat, as close as I can. I traced out a circle, eyeballing it to be about the same size as the mug. To prevent touching and risking damage to the pattern, I maneuvered the mug body by gripping the tube section. I positioned the mug body over the circle until it was centered. I then took the body off and scored and slipped both it and the bottom like so. I reattached the two together, centering the body over the bottom. I then used my finger to seal the clay together. I cut the excess clay away from the bottom less than 1/4 inch away from the edge of the body and removed the excess. I used my finger to push that little bit of clay against the side of the mug body to further seal the two parts together. Again, you can do all this on a banding wheel. I used a wooden tool with a notch at the bottom to create a nice rounded edge. I slid the tube away from the plastic wrap. Then I twisted the plastic wrap until it peeled away from the clay. I used a long wet brush against the bottom edge between the body and the bottom to seal the inside edge of the mug. I also used the same brush to seal the inside of the seam along the body. I then used my fingers along the rim to thin out and round the top edge of the mug. This also helps to round the mug so it won't try and warp. Now if you're doing this on a banding wheel, you can insert a round tapered cup inside the rim to round it out. And there you have it. I try not to touch the mug again until it is stiffened up, maybe about 2 hours or so. So doing this can risk the clay warping and also messing up the pattern. In the meantime, I cut out a clay handle using this extruder tool right off of the clay from the bag. I just love that profile. After 2 hours, the mug was stiff enough to put the handle on. I cut the handle blank flat on one end and scored it. I then scored an area along the top of the seam, slipped that area, and attached the two together as securely as I could using a brush to seal the area between the two parts. I repeated this process for the bottom part of the handle. Notice that I placed the handle right over the seam, which helps to hide where the pattern is interrupted. Again, I used the brush to seal the joint and strengthen the bond. So here's our mug. I'm really happy with how the seam came out. Our taking the time to make sure the measurements were accurate really paid off. The top and bottom are nice and round, and it has a classic profile which holds a lot of liquid. It may not be totally perfect, but it is as close as I can get for hand building. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. See you next time in the studio.